For years I kept a notebook full of pictures of the things I love. Torn out pages, scraps of paper, wrought iron dates.
Good morning, everybody. It's Lynn from A Bit of Birdsong. I wanted to show you a journal that is going into the shop. It's been a while since I've done something along the lines of my Boho Birds journal, but I was in the mood to just put together a journal in the style where I sew in the signatures but make it really like a bird watching trip. I get lost in the theme and just thinking about the people that, you know, might have existed in the past. The cover is a fabric covered file folder, one of my favorite types to make, and you can see the stitching on the outside where the 9 signatures were sewn in with a sewing machine. The charms on the outside include a rusty bottle cap that I picked up while out on a walk. There is a little bottle that's got some beads in it. I don't remember where I got this, honestly. I have a box full of charms and I don't remember where I got that. This is a brass tag. I think it's brass, it looks like brass, and it just has the number 5 on it. You can see my birdsong stamp in the back. Okay, before we get inside, this is a strip of fabric obviously covered in buttons. This came off of a purse that I found probably, has it been a year ago? Or maybe, I don't remember. The pandemic has totally derailed my memory as far as time and dates. But I found a beautiful button covered purse that was made in India, and unfortunately the closure, the clasp was ruined. It just did not work. I couldn't get it to work, and when you held the purse by the chain, it fell open. So, you know, as beautiful as it was not practical to try to carry anywhere, even out for an evening, because nobody wants to carry a purse that is obviously just hanging open. But I just went along with the sewing machine, set it on a zigzag stitch, put the length of the stitch to 0 so that your needle's not going to move this way, just back and forth like that, and you get the width just right. Make sure your needle's just right so it's not going to hit the button. In other words, you start out slow, and then when you hit the pedal, you know, it'll just go back and forth. So I chose, let's see, like 6, 7 buttons to sew into place, and then I put a little bit of glue underneath the fabric that wasn't stuck down. Getting into this, it's been a while since I made a journal that was full of just a lot of fun ephemera, and this is mostly bird related. That's just a pretty card that I believe I found out thrifting. Looks like somebody stamped that. It was not me. I can't take credit for that. There is a picture from a bird book. This is the European starling, and that was sewn onto some paper that came off of my gel plate. And then we have an old book plate. It's really pretty. Here is a picture that I put into my Patreon yesterday. I put an entire collage of 4 different pictures of ladies traveling. I love this. I love the shoes. I love how she's sitting there so proper on the brick wall, but it's just a beautiful picture. And this journal is full of stamping and little bits of art and painting and things that I've done along the way. I used a date stamp right here without the year just to put a little random number at the bottom, and I love that. It just makes it look like almost like a little passport type thing, like maybe she was part of a travel trip, a bird watching trip, and that's kind of what was in my mind while I was making this. The back of this is a file folder from the Dollar Tree. I took the printed 8.5 by 11 collage of photographs, glued it to this and let it dry, and then I cut each one out and distressed the edges and the back. Here are a couple of pages from a vintage bird book, and underneath there is just a little painting that I did. It says always sing. This is some ephemera from a kit or a little like digital that I have in my shop. It's called Let's Go Birding. That's from a little book, a children's book from the early 1900s, Mr. Owl. It's All Around Our House, I think is the book. Piece of scrapbook paper. And I tried to label some of the birds that came off of cards and things like that. So that's the red-bellied woodpecker. And we have another little drawing here. There's a parakeet. There's a tiny little sketch from my art journal. Here is some of the ephemera from the things that were in the old history book. So this is an excuse for absence, and it says the reason is working on the pinnacle, but I put these in here just thinking about maybe this trip and some of the children had to miss school or whatever to go with their parents. There's another, like a tardy slip here from that same set of ephemera. This is part of the Let's Go Birding digital. It looks like a seed pack, or it's the front of a seed catalog, I believe, from the early 1900s. Let's put that back. There are some rusty paper clips in there. There's a yellow tanager. That's from a greeting card. And there's a lot of room yet to work in here. I wanted to put a lot of my own touch in this, but also leave just a large amount of room for you to work in it. Here is one of the butterflies that's got some alcohol ink on it, and I've just stitched right down the middle to hold that into place. There's a little bird charm. Looks like a swallow and a stamp with some birds on it. And here we have a paint chip, but I love that it says Oak Creek. I was just picturing this travel excursion where people are out looking at birds and taking notes and picking up little pieces of this and that. And it's of course got some new combined with old, bringing in names, bringing in things that are part of a theme, and just the fun of adding old and new. I really like that. So this is that piece of text that came from one of the books I was pulling pages from, An Occasional Train Robbery. And it's got this ghostly sort of stamped image from where we stamped on photo paper with alcohol ink. And I just thought about back in the early, well, like the late 1800s. And so just thinking about people being out in the woods, going through trails, over trails that are in the woods, and maybe getting robbed or whatever, that would always be a threat. Traveling that way. And then on this page we have another stamp and drawing, and I like to take stamps, ink stamps, and then add to them. I think that's a really fun way to practice faces. I love that it says songs present, songs past, and this is a sheet from a bird book. I took all of the pages out and tea stained those, and they've been hanging on the clothesline, which is the reason for the marks there. Love that yellow. Here is a postcard. This is the Downy Woodpecker, and that's one of the little Tim Holtz index card clips. On top of that, there's just a vintage piece of wallpaper. And again, I was thinking about these people traveling, bird watching, staying at different places, and just finding things that they're able to tuck into their bird watching notebooks. And there's cuckoo. Pretty greeting card. I don't know if they really look like that, but that came from a package of greeting cards that I have. That's really pretty. I need to look that up. This page came from the Dollar Tree book that I purchased not too long ago for the Dollar Tree Junk Journal Challenge, and I'm still using pages from that. The book was called something like Love Letters That You Were Never Meant to See, so it was full of letters from different people to other people. On this page are a couple more pieces of ephemera from the digital kit called Let's Go Birding. I love this kit. It's just a couple of pages, but the images are just so perfect for a bird journal. And that's from a very old alphabet book, foreign text, as you can see. And I'm not sure about the language. I don't want to guess. And I don't remember. Parakeet there. This image came from the cover of a box of greeting cards, and the cards were beautiful, the box was beautiful, so I just tore the cover off of the box. Have heart and hope and happiness. These are fun. This is from a box of vintage index tabs. Here's the original box. It says reinforced gummed cloth, and you just cut the size that you want to use. I use glue to attach it. It says gummed, but I just put a little bit of Elmer's glue in there before I attach it to the page. And again, I stamped that with just a random date. It's got April 15th. So this is more paper from my art desk. You know, I typically keep some large papers behind what I'm working on all the time, and that way I get all of that beautiful, you know, the water stains, the ink stains, stamping, places where I've tested pens and pencils, and it turns out just some really cool paper to use in art journals. This, I sealed this up because this is a feather from my mom's little farm. She has guineas. They are gorgeous feathers. There are a few ink stains on the paper inside, but there was also a bit of debris from the yard that got caught in the downy little feathers at the bottom of this, what do you call that? The spine of the feather. I'm not sure what that's called, but I just went ahead and taped that down, sealed up the envelope so that you can enjoy the beauty of it, but not have to handle the feather. Lots of space underneath to work on. Again, this is from a bird book. And here's part of an old map, a National Geographic map. And this was, I believe, migratory patterns of birds. That's from 1979. Some ink stamp underneath. This was just a really pretty piece of fabric that I had in the workshop. It looks like it came from an old bedspread. It has been washed. It's just a little scrap from my fabric stash. There is another piece of ephemera from the old book. Please permit birdsong to enter class, excused, unexcused. And that was just, I think whatever had been on there was faded. And then here is the history test that was in that book. This is in my Patreon, and I'm going to be adding this to my Etsy shop as well as a download. So I just printed that, cut it out, and then really distressed it a lot. We worked on this in the last video about ways to distress pages for art journals and junk journals. That's more paper from my art desk and more space for you to work. I love this. This is one of the photos that is with the little page, the collage page of ladies traveling. I will put this in my Etsy shop as well. I love this picture of the bicycles, and the girls look like they're just out for an outing. I want to show you a really fun way to quickly make a piece of ephemera or, you know, digital photograph look older. I keep bottles and things like this on my desk all the time. I love rusty hinge. I'm not sure where that pad got to. I'm not going to dig all through that drawer right now, but let's just take the spicy marmalade and just put your lid through here and then sit it down, and it'll make a ring shape, almost like a glass. If you got the glass wet first, I am thinking it would probably make even more of a ring. Yeah, see that? I tried not to get it on the table that time. So let's put that back. There's just a little piece of scrapbook paper with a bird that's been sewn onto it. There is a playing card that I distressed. Here is another ink stamp, and then I took a brush and a little bit of water and just spread that ink out. I wrote lovely at the bottom. This is pretty interesting. That's a piece of handmade paper, and I just put strips of masking tape on it before I stamped on it. So I stamped right onto that masking tape, and it just gives an unusual effect. I love playing with paper and finding new ways to do things. This little bag has been stained somewhat, and again, I was picturing the people picking up bits and pieces as they're on their bird watching trip. And this has got some of the rusty pieces that I have found in parking lots lately. So that's in there, those little rusty pieces. And there is another distressed playing card and another piece of paper from my art desk. I just took some alcohol ink and put on the paper clip after it was put on the page, so it leaves the mark on the page as well. And here's a postcard, greetings from Durham. This has got the name of the artist on here if you want to check them out, Amy May Pop Art. And Durham is where I live. There is a stamp with a bird on it. You can see some writing stamped here. I used all different kinds of fabric to sew in these signatures. You can see that. I should have pointed that out. Sometimes I stick with just the same thing all the way through, but I wanted this to feel like the original Boho Birds with all the different color and fabric and textures. Here is another picture from the collage of the women traveling or the ladies traveling. You can tell she's out on the beach. And then here is just some paper that was cut out of a book that you can write on or collage with. My mom found this book at a thrift store and picked it up for me because she knows that I love things like this. I didn't really care for the text at the top because it was like a couples therapy thing, but all of this was beautiful. So I'm going to be putting that in some kits that I'm working on currently. Here's a little greeting card that I just closed, cut out in the shape of a tag, and then stitched together, and it's got just a piece of cloth ribbon in there. Here's an old library card that says Nature Study. It's about a book from 1903. And then here is a piece of wallpaper with a bird on it, 1986. And this is just stamped from a box that had playing cards in it. I was also thinking about people traveling, and you know, back then there were no phones, there was no digital communication. So people played games, they talked, they sketched. I think people were a lot more proficient at writing, journal keeping, and sketching nature around them, because that was one of the things that especially young ladies were encouraged to do. And all you had on your hand was time a lot of the time. Time a lot of the time. So, you know, you get better if you do something a lot. And then in here, this was the front of a greeting card. You can see the rook there, and that, I put practice on that because that was definitely some really just messy practice of shapes, and the legs look pretty, it almost looks like a toy or some garish thing, but I went ahead and stuck that in there because it does say practice. Another piece of wallpaper with a bird on it, and again you can see some of the rings that have been made from the lids and jars I keep on the desk. Love this fabric. And there's more paper from my art desk. Here is another page. That was a napkin that I put down with some gesso, and it seems like this had stuck to it just a little bit. But this is another page that's been stained, and then, oops, and then put into the journal. A few little sheets to write notes on. And this came from a vintage book of songbirds. And then it had one of those books of the tiny little records that you could put on an old record player and listen to the different bird sounds. So I just cut that out and put that in. Got several more pages of that to use. Here's another piece of ephemera from the set Let's Go Birding. And that is all distressed and faded. I love what the water spots do to images printed from an inkjet printer. They kind of run a little bit. I try to be careful not to spray the faces because, you know, you do get that running, but it looks really vintage in other spots. And then here we have a couple more pieces of fabric to make a pocket, and there's a purple grackle. And so this is one of the older photos of the lady, and it looks like maybe a woman and her daughter, and they're definitely on some sort of trolley. You could tell that more from maybe the tops and bottoms, because it was just, see how her arm is leaning out, and you can see part of a window there. And again, that's backed with the file folder. I put this in just because I thought it was really pretty. It's from an old children's book, 1955, and again, I was thinking about times where people traveled without anything digital, and they would have had books and things to keep the children entertained. There's another piece of ephemera from Let's Go Birding. That's from a vintage ad, a type of soap there. Another piece of another book page from a bird book. And then I love this. So I had this old book called Perry that was falling apart, and it was about a pair of birds, actually, and it is all speaking from the bird's point of view. So that is a really fun text. And then I put this in because that reminds me of some sort of bird, like maybe a dove, and it's just an accidental paint stain. There's another part of that map about bird migration, and there's a little pocket from like a library pocket. Inside of that, we have several pieces of ephemera from the Let's Go Birding set. There's an old song, Feather Your Nest, a cover from another seed catalog, and you can see the ladies dressed up to go out. There's an image of a squirrel and a bird having a little talk. 1898, that's again a cover of a seed catalog. So all of these are in here. Children used to be encouraged to cut pictures out of old magazines. They saved paper bags. They saved anything like that because it became art supplies. It became scrapbooks. I have an old ledger from the 1860s, and it has been glued over. You can tell that it was used for multiple purposes. Some of it has writing, and then someone went back over it and glued newspaper clippings and things. So in this very last pocket, I did not make this. I bought this while out thrifting, and it just looks like somebody cut out the shape of a feather and then cut all of these little individual pieces of the feather and glued it onto a piece of wire. So I think that is adorable. I would like to make some of these, and actually that's on the to-do list. I just haven't done it yet. I don't know who made this though. I don't know who to credit with this idea. Really, really pretty. And of course they used sheet music for that. Here is a pretty card. Thor Axelson Dreyer. It says printed in Denmark. Really, really pretty. That's from a bookstore, Raven Used Books. And then this is just a little stack of notepad paper that I stitched across with the sewing machine and a piece of lace, and then sewed a button to the top of that. And let's put that back in. And then of course we're back at the back with my stamp. And then this is just a piece of silk fabric that is tied around the journal. So there is that beautiful journal. Well, to me, I love it. It's been a while since I made one of the Boho Birds journals, and this is Boho Birds / art journal. Currently in the shop. I will be listing more things today, finishing up some custom orders to send out today. Thank you so much for your patience, those of you who are waiting on journals. I don't know where the days go, so I will be back really soon. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. I will see you soon. Bye for now.